Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, I want to talk through some of the main stories that have happened over the last week, the current understanding of them, and where things are at as we head into the final week of this another international break. I will be gone, maybe having a few videos here and there over the next few days as we head in towards the weekend. So wanted to just catch up with this on all of the latest, as I have quite a few things to talk about and cover over the last few days that I want to keep up with, so that at least we're up to date if nothing else major goes down between now and the end of the week, which, well, it's hard to know. It's hard to know with United whether there will be. But I want to talk about Bruno Fernandes and his situation, the midfield, and the targets and some of the changing sort of thinking in there. I want to talk about Lisandro, maybe a little bit on the takeover, and then a couple other random things. And by a little bit on the takeover, I mean, is there actually anything to discuss on the takeover? The answer is probably no. But let's take a look and let's get right into the first thing. The first thing I want to talk about here is Bruno Fernandes. Now, obviously, in the last couple of weeks, essentially the idea that Bruno would be heading to Saudi has been essentially killed, with him stating that he would not be leaving. He hadn't really thought about Saudi, and from stories from Simon Stone and others saying basically that Bruno will not be thinking about going to Saudi in the future. Now, this, of course, confirms the reality, which is that he did turn down that move to Saudi, him and nobody else. That's the reason why he didn't go. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that Bruno may leave at the end of the season or may not. He is still considering his options. His agent has been regularly checking out different options around Europe, just because he should, at this stage in his career, keep an eye on where he may be going and what might happen. There's a lot up in the air on this, and where we end up with Bruno at the end of the season is going to have quite a knock-on effect, frankly, in terms of what kind of business we do, how many midfielders we buy, what happens with Kobbie Mainoo, and otherwise. Is Bruno going to be the main guy moving forward into next season as well as the primary midfielder, as this creator? Is Amorim here? Obviously, there's quite a few questions to ask there. My understanding is and has been that Bruno would prefer probably to consider a move to one of the bigger clubs in Europe that have been in discussions with him. Bayern, Barcelona, and clubs in Italy have expressed interest in recent times. If he is to leave, and there is a chance he leaves at the end of the year, obviously it would be more likely to one of those at this point in time. And I think it very much depends where United are at. It's hard to say if United are moving up into the Champions League, will he want to stay? Probably. If it's another year in Europa, which is a more realistic goal, then I think it's very 50-50 at this point as to whether he would want to take another year, head into essentially the final year of his contract after that, and say, well, this might be your last chance next year to get that move to a real Champions League club. By the time United are back into these competitions, and there's no guarantee, obviously, going from a season in Europa to the Champions League, that might be your last chance. So it's a bit 50-50, and I think if United are outside of Europe again, which I don't think will happen, but if it does, then I think the likelihood of Bruno leaving increases dramatically. So it really depends where we are at and how this addresses the future, but Bruno unlikely to leave in this, obviously in January, and unlikely to go to Saudi. So either way, United will not be getting something like 100 million. If he is to go to one of the clubs in Europe, you're probably looking at more in the 40-50 range, given his age, and wages off, which is still very significant, but more likely at this point in time, depending on where United end up at the end of the season. So this remains to be seen. However, it does still imply implications and show implications into what United are looking for and where they may end up targeting in January and in summer when it comes to the midfield. Now, I did a whole breakdown on all of the different midfielders over the last few days in a live video, as well as on just a general recording, going over things which I definitely recommend watching, as they were a good recap of all of the different targets, and I'm not going to recap it all at this point in time. But Bruno staying will very likely affect whether there is a second midfielder and as well what happens with Kobbie Mainoo. Either way, I would suggest there is a high likelihood United end up with two midfielders between January and summer. It has been thought about. It has been under consideration. Casemiro will depart. Bruno or Kobbie, one of them is seemingly likely to depart by next summer. Not in January. United do not have a mind to let Kobbie Mainoo leave in January, despite the concerns he has over playtime and things like that. Again, United would prefer he stays, get him into the squad, get him going, and ideally, someone who can take over from Bruno in the future. But either way, United will very likely need two midfielders between January and summer and are looking at it in terms of two different types of positions. One of them is that more attacking 8, that more box-to-box all-rounder, which might be, you know, your Elliot Andersons, your Edersons, these types of names that could come in there that are very likely, in my opinion, a replacement for someone like Bruno. And someone who could play with, you know, in different roles as well, depending on the game. But I would suggest that would be sort of the midfielder, that more attacking 8 of this midfield. And regardless of what your thoughts are on the manager, the fact is we actually need a lot of midfielders anyway. So we'll very likely need one of those 8s kind of either way. If we switch to a 3-man midfield, we're going to need him too. If you pushed Bruno up into the 10 and he stayed, you would still need more options in that midfield. But more likely, the first priority is a number 6. That being said, because United need both, if they could get something in January, they'll get whatever they can get. If it's one of their main targets, there's a willingness to go for it. If it's available, if it's possible, it may not be the deep-sitting 6. It might be the 8, simply because you want to get a jump on the competition, and there's a lot of big clubs that are going to be chasing midfielders over the next couple of windows. And again, when you're looking at an overhaul, and this is one of the things I think to take into consideration in terms of the thought of like, well, should we have not gotten 2 10s or a striker and gone for a midfielder? One of the things that has to be considered with that realistically is that, well, that sounds good in theory. There is a whole overhaul in play. So they needed the striker, and I think Benjamin Šeško, which we'll talk about in a little bit, has been very good. They needed these 10s. They needed these players in all these different positions. Yes, they needed more, but the idea is over a multiple year kind of rebuild. We need more. So if we need a 6 now, but we also know we're going to need an 8, and we're going to need a center back, and we're going to need a wing back, well, you get whatever you can because it's about the long-term rebuild project. And that was the thinking, and that'll be the thinking in terms of the midfield going into January as well. If there's, or other positions, mind you, if one of their major targets is available and they can get them, whether it's the exact position they need right now today or not, it'll be considered because it's about completing the long-term overhaul of the club and of the structure. Now, the way that Ruben Amorim's playing these days, which I covered in the last couple of videos, is more of that deeper sitting sort of 6. As I can say today, my understanding is Carlos Baleba still remains probably the main target. However, there are concerns within the club in terms of this turn down in form. I have heard concerns. I have heard people say, you know, if he's unhappy, if the pressure is getting to him, if the instability is getting to him, how would he react to joining United for a lot of money? How would he react to the pressure? How would he react to a new environment? How would he react to the difficulty we see at United, to all of these changes? Would it be good or not? Is raising questions, not questions that as of yet will say, hey, scup for a transfer. Obviously, there's a few months until January, even though it'll be difficult to get him then, and even longer, of course, until next summer. There still are questions being raised as to say, do we have to worry about this? And some of those questions will ideally be answered by his play over the next few months, but there are questions being asked, so that's something to keep an eye on. Adam Wharton has been a long-term target of United, someone they really like, an alternative as well in that deeper 6 position. Baleba, Wharton, Yeoman were the main players looked at for that deeper position in this last summer. And they are, of course, also remaining options as of now. There's been a lot of talk recently with Adam Wharton, talk from the Crystal Palace chairman, talk from some papers and things like that. Obviously, he's currently sitting in and playing probably in a position, in a role that suits almost exactly what United would want in matching up with Casemiro. They will consider him, but it'll be really hard to get some of these players in January. So we'll see. But they are intending to take a look and see what they can do. Between this January and next summer, between those two windows, though, I would expect United are in the market for two midfielders, one of them in that more deeper role. Baleba, Wharton, Yeoman being major targets there. Buwadi, a young player they have an eye on. And then Anderson, Ederson, some other targets in different positions. But as of now, it's still kind of evolving in terms of who they might want to go for. It certainly is. But Baleba remains a major target. Just questions at the moment that are being asked that hopefully will get answered before January. I think United will, again, be willing to invest should they be able to obtain one of these players. And that's the difficulty. Getting players from other Premier League sides in January that they view as key players is going to be tough, but something they may consider and something they're going to attempt. In terms of another boost to the team, now this is, I'm curious to see if this changes the way that we play, how quickly he comes back, and how he returns Lisandro. Now, in summer, I mentioned at the time that it was my understanding it would take a bit longer for Lisandro to return. There was talk of him coming back in September. There was talk of him being ready by then. From what I heard, no, wasn't going to be the case. Was always set to be more like end of October, early November. According to our good friend Sully here, he flew out to Dubai, did some warm weather training as part of his designated training program. And his current projection is to return to group training after the international break. Now, I think it's important to be still not skeptical, but wary of the fact that just returning to group training after such a long thing doesn't mean he's imminently returning into the team. He will be around the environment, obviously, will be around the team, could even be in some of the squads. But the idea that he will actually be able to, the idea that he'll actually be able to play yet, not sure. And we have to watch out because after an injury like this, it's very regular. It's very common to pick up multiple more muscle injuries. United have wanted to take it slow. That's why it's taken so long for him to come back. That's why it's, that projection September, actually, let's look at October, maybe even early November to actually get on the pitch. The injuries, you don't want to pick up more and more injuries. Now, Lisandro provides something on that side that we're really lacking. Right now, we've seen a lot of our progression coming down the right side. Ahmad, Mbumo, Yoro on that side being aggressive. On the left, getting Lisandro in there, having a bit more aggression to carry the ball forward, to progress the ball, to step up in the midfield, I think will make a big difference to Amorim, and I think he's somebody he'll want immediately to come into the side if and when he's fit. Yes, Lisandro doesn't have the speed that Yoro has in getting back in those wide channels and things like that, but he is very aggressive, very intelligent, knowing when to step up, and also in terms of progressing the ball, I think will do wonders to help Patrick Dorgu on that side and to help United with some solutions from deep. I'd certainly rather see him playing at the moment, than Shaw. I think he will give us more consistency and all of that, but it'd still be a little while for Lisandro. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't really play until maybe the final game before the next international break, even though he's set to return soon to group training. It can take some time, and they want to be very, very careful with his return so that there is, just with his return so that there's nothing like you don't get another hamstring injury or something like that that ends up resulting in, more months on the sideline away, and that there's a way he can make an impact into the team this season. So we'll see what happens there. Now, in terms of this whole takeover business, the reality is there's nothing going on this front. As I said originally when I looked into it, there was really nothing by way of like an actual bids, actual offers, or anything like that actually happening as of yet. There very well may be a group that is looking at investing in United, looking at putting something together to make an approach. They're very wow, my words are not working today. There very well may be a group that is putting things together for partnering, for looking at, how could we get involved? There might be a group that's looking to send a signal to the Glazers or to Sir Jim. But what I can tell you for sure is they're not holding a bunch of secret meetings right now to buy the club, that it is pretty much business as usual for the Glazers and Sir Jim at the moment, and Ineos in terms of working through the plans that they're working on, which are significant and substantial when it comes to stadium, when it comes to all of this that they're trying to work through and get done. They do have connections in these areas, both the Glazers and Sir Jim, who has plenty of connections given his business to the Middle East and to different areas. But at the moment, there's nothing really happening on this, front. It's something to just stick off to the side and say, hey, maybe when a group is there that can be named, that can put forward something, maybe soon, maybe in years. We don't know. It'll be worth talking about. But until then, look to more potential investments and things like that. As I heard originally when I looked into this, not something that should be taken too seriously at the moment. Just maybe somebody's idea out there to do something, but nothing much right now. Now, again, as I've shared before, despite the eagerness of media to forget about certain, clauses and things like that, while there's been a lot made of things like the drag-along rights, it's really important to also note that there is also the right of first offer, which would require the Glazers to notify and offer the club to Sir Jim and Ineos prior to soliciting and to having discussions with other people. Otherwise, they'd be in heavy violation of their own purchase agreement. So it is extremely unlikely for something like that to happen. I'm surprised I have not seen people mention that. Maybe it's not as exciting because then it kind of tears down, unfortunately, the idea that there could be something going on. As I've said before, I'd be wholeheartedly in for any group that wants to come in if they're going to do everything, clear the debt, take it all over. And if it's a bunch of people from, who are bringing in United ex-players as ambassadors or partners, hold with me. So I guess we will see if anything further actually develops on this. But for now, it's nothing that anybody is aware of or acting on that would give us any reason really to think about it or discuss it more at this point in time. So for now, I guess we just leave it at that and say it is what it is. We'll see if anything else comes forward. Now, a couple more things that I want to discuss on the transfer front as well as news. Now, it's really interesting. I always go back to this whole funny way that transfers and things are reported, and the way that people will assess news and all of that. And I always give you a warning. Look, what gets reported, what gets widespread is often only what people want. And with United, it could not be more true in the last couple of years, especially since Ineos has come in, kept things really quiet and very low on this front. Gyökeres' agent came out and basically confirmed United had agreed a deal with Sporting for Victor Gyökeres at the start of summer. So that whole period of time when I was saying, hey guys, we're really working on Gyökeres. There's a lot of discussions with Gyökeres. We've agreed. We're talking about Gyökeres. We're working on things with Gyökeres. We really want Gyökeres in as our priority target. He's like priority number one. And I got a lot of pushback from people saying, no, it isn't. Nobody's reporting it. Nobody's reporting it. Nobody's reporting it. It was true. It was what was going on. United were looking to bring him in very strongly. Now, this isn't a point to say we should have or any of that. I'm actually really, really happy with Šeško. It seems like Vavell pushing him forward. Obviously, United have been following him a long time, pushing him forward as we got later into summer. I'm really happy with him. I think he looks like an all-around great player, and I'm just so happy that we get somebody where it's like, maybe it wasn't the obvious, maybe there was some risk involved, but it looks like it's working out. So happy about it. Regardless, we did want Gyökeres. We did go for him. And again, I just remember the amount of pushback I got, like, well, nobody else is talking about it. It's not true. You're just making up these types of things. It is what it is. So where am I going with this? I'll probably bring back the chart this year because despite the much maligned chart, it was the truth. Even that chart that everybody was looking at, about 80% of the names on there, United contacted, discussed, looked at, tried, beyond just scouting. And they scouted 100% of the names on there. And I really want to just make very clear, I know people who watch my stuff these days probably know this already, that just because it's not being reported all over the place doesn't make it not true. And that's how you have to look at news. You've got to be careful on this because so often after the fact, you find out, hey, all that stuff was true. All of those things were true that you said. And just be wary. I report things because of the truth, not because I want to say them, not because I want to hear them. I wasn't reporting on Victor Gyökeres because I really wanted to sign Victor Gyökeres. I did. And so far, it looks like we dodged a bullet at the moment. You know, although he'd be better for us than he would be for Arsenal, which is just makes him even stupider. My point is, when I report things like on the Takeover, when I say there's not much in it at the moment, when I talk about different subjects, I don't talk about things just because I want them to be true. I talk about them because they are. And I'm very confident in the sources and things that I have on that front. So just worth mentioning. We'll probably bring that back to chart ahead of January because got a lot of names to keep track of, and I think it's easier to see. And then we got to start adding them to center backs, to wing backs, to all the different positions. And I think it's not so much about me, but more about giving us something to understand in terms of what United are looking at, especially now, because I think this last summer, it was amusing just how little knowledge there was out there. Months of quiet, weeks of people not knowing what was going on, that I was often reporting on most of it. I think it's useful to talk through it all. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that as a message of just a reminder. There's more going on than is reported. But I'm also only ever going to tell you things that I know are to be true, whether or not I like them. And that leads me to the next one, which is Ruben Amorim. As I've said many times in the last few weeks, while there's pressure to get results, he's not likely going anywhere anytime soon. As Sir Jim stated about the whole 3 years and all that, which is not really the truth, but I can reiterate and tell you once again that the full mind of the club and the full backing of everybody involved right now is to make things work with Ruben Amorim. It's a discussion we probably shouldn't be talking about. And I bring that up as we go into the week, as we go into Liverpool. Barring some disastrous 7-0 loss or something like that, it's really unlikely that the position on Ruben Amorim is going to change at all. In fact, we probably shouldn't discuss it until the next international break. So long as United are within striking distance of Europe, it's very likely that he will stay in the job. And the longer that goes on, if he makes it through that international break in November, that then leads into a busy December period into January, then they're probably not going to be thinking about a manager change at all until earliest end of season. So the next probably 4 to 6 weeks will probably confirm Amorim staying for the rest of the season. Should United get a decent run of results in those 4 games, if they pick up another, I would say 7-8 points minimum over those 4 games, then he will very likely be, we can probably consider that he'll stay for the rest of the season, that they'll want to give him some backing in January and all of that. That's just the truth. That's where we're at. And I think that provides the baseline for discussion. And then the following thing, the last thing I want to mention that is sort of a growing little whispers around is a story on Joshua Zirkzee, obviously on whether he may want to go in January or not. And of course, there is truth to this. There is worry from him in terms of, there is worry for him, in terms of, playtime, all of that ahead of the World Cup and everything. And there is some concern on his side, definitely, as to whether he'll have a place, whether he'll get the time. A lot can happen between now and January, but it certainly is something under consideration. So you have to think about the position list grows a little bit here and there. Midfielder, maybe 2, a center back, a wing back, and potentially a striker. And United will be looking at all of those positions and assessing the January market as well and saying, can we get anybody? So rather than looking at it saying specifically like, we want a midfielder in January, we do. We want a lot of positions. If we can get one of our priority targets in one of those positions or multiple in January, then there's a willingness to do it. The question is, can we? And it's good timing because, as I've said this, I see a thing from Fabrizio Romano saying United and other clubs appreciate Wharton, but Pals want to keep him. Like I said, the difficulty will be, can we pull any of these players away? And the same goes at striker. We're not going to let Xerxes go with we don't have a good idea of who we want to bring in. There's potential for a young player to come in. And there's potential for a senior sort of striker to come in. But Šeško is very likely the guy. So I wouldn't think too much on like a major striker signing or anything like that because they're very, very happy with it. Okay, that's what I've got for this video. Probably won't have a live later, so wanted to get this out. As a reminder, it's cold as hell over here where I am right now, and it might be getting cold where you are too. You can head over. I've got tons of good sweaters and been getting a lot of good feedback, especially on the quality of this embroidered one, how it looks. But tons of nice cold weather clothing as we get into the cooler months to check out over on Muppeteers.com. So head over there and see. Let me know your thoughts on that and pick up some of the latest merchandise. Okay, that's what I've got for today's video. Thank you for watching. I'll be back sporadically through the week, but otherwise at the weekend and for Liverpool as we get back into the swing of things. All right, thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next video.